the Red Sea miracle. Scientists may have finally explained it. In 2010, a team of atmospheric scientists at the National Center for Atmospheric Research ran a computer simulation that stunned the scientific community. Using sophisticated climate models and data about ancient weather patterns, they discovered something remarkable. Under very specific conditions, strong winds could actually part a body of water, creating dry land for several hours before the waters rushed back. They weren't trying to prove the Bible, they were studying ancient climatology. But what they found made one of the Bible's most famous miracles suddenly seem a lot less miraculous and a lot more possible. Could the parting of the Red Sea actually have happened? Not through divine intervention, but through a rare and extraordinary natural phenomenon that ancient witnesses interpreted as the hand of God? Welcome back to Should I Go, where we investigate the science and archaeology behind ancient mysteries. Today, we're diving into one of the Bible's most spectacular events, examining the evidence and discovering that the truth might be stranger than fiction. Let's start with what the Bible actually tells us. According to the book of Exodus, chapters 13 and 14, the Israelites had just escaped from slavery in Egypt. Pharaoh, having released them after the 10th plague, suddenly changed his mind and sent his army racing after them with 600 chariots. The Israelites found themselves trapped between the Egyptian army and a body of water that the Hebrew Bible calls Yam Suf. Traditionally translated as the Red Sea, this name literally means Sea of Reeds. That translation detail is going to become very important in a moment. As the Egyptians closed in, Moses stretched out his hand over the water. The Bible says, quote, "The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites crossed on dry ground with walls of water on both sides. When the Egyptians pursued them, Moses stretched out his hand again, the waters returned, and Pharaoh's entire army was drowned." It's a story of perfect timing, miraculous intervention, and divine deliverance. For thousands of years, it's been understood as one of the clearest examples of God suspending the laws of nature. But here's the fascinating part. The Bible itself suggests a natural mechanism. It specifically mentions a strong east wind blowing all night. Not just a wind, but a powerful, sustained wind from a specific direction. Why would the Bible include that detail if the event was purely supernatural? Before we can investigate whether the parting could have happened, we need to figure out where it supposedly occurred. And this is where things get complicated, because the traditional location is almost certainly wrong. For centuries, people assumed the Israelites crossed the Red Sea itself, somewhere near the modern-day Gulf of Suez or Gulf of Aqaba. Countless paintings and movies show Moses parting the deep blue waters of the Red Sea, with massive walls of water towering on both sides. But there are serious problems with this interpretation. First, remember that the Hebrew text says Yam Suf, which means Sea of Reeds. The Red Sea doesn't have reeds. It's a deep saltwater sea. Reeds grow in shallow, marshy waters. Second, the geography described in Exodus doesn't match the Red Sea at all. The Bible mentions specific locations like Pi-hahiroth, Migdol, and Baal-zephon. While we're not certain where these places were, geographical clues suggest the Israelites were traveling through the marshy region of northern Egypt, near the Mediterranean coast. Third, crossing the actual Red Sea would make no strategic sense. The Israelites were supposedly fleeing toward Canaan, to the northeast. The Red Sea lies to the south and southeast. Why would they head in the wrong direction? Most modern scholars and archaeologists now believe the crossing occurred somewhere in the marshy region of northern Egypt, possibly at Lake Bala, Lake Timsah, or the shallow lagoons that once connected to the Mediterranean Sea. This region, known in ancient times as the Reed Sea or the Papyrus Marshes, was characterized by shallow water bodies, extensive wetlands, and seasonal changes in water levels. In ancient times, before the Suez Canal dramatically altered the landscape, this entire region was a maze of shallow lakes, marshes, and channels. And it's in this kind of environment scientists discovered that something very unusual can happen. Gap 4S. In 2010, Carl Drews and Wei-King Han from the National Center for Atmospheric Research published a paper in the journal PLOS One with a provocative title, Dynamics of Wind Setdown at Suez and the Eastern Nile Delta. What they discovered was a phenomenon called wind setdown, and it could explain exactly what the Bible describes. Here's how it works. When strong, sustained winds blow across a body of water, they push the water in the direction the wind is blowing. In a deep ocean, this doesn't have much visible effect. But in a shallow body of water with a specific shape, something remarkable can happen. If the wind is strong enough and blows long enough, it can actually push the water away from one end of the lake or channel, exposing the bottom and creating a temporary land bridge. The water doesn't disappear. It gets pushed to the other end, where it piles up higher than normal. Drews and Hahn ran computer simulations using ancient topography data from the Nile Delta region. They modeled what would happen if a wind of 63 miles per hour, about the strength of a tropical storm, blew consistently for 12 hours across a shallow water body in the area. The results were stunning. The simulations showed that such a wind could push back the water in a shallow lagoon or channel, creating a dry pathway about 2 to 2.5 miles long and 3 miles wide. The land bridge would remain passable for about 4 hours before the winds died down and the water rushed back. Even more remarkably, the Bible says the wind blew all that night, which fits the 12-hour time frame needed. And it specifically mentions an east wind, which matches the wind direction that would create this effect in the northern delta region. The scientists weren't setting out to prove the Bible. They were studying ancient climatology and wind patterns. But what they found matched the biblical account with eerie precision. But could such winds actually occur in that region? Or is this just theoretical? It turns out that powerful wind events in the Nile Delta region are not only possible, they're documented throughout history. Ancient Egyptian texts mention strong winds from the east that would dramatically alter water levels in the Delta region. Greek and Roman historians describe similar phenomena along the Mediterranean coast, where sustained winds would temporarily expose land that was normally underwater. In more recent times, meteorologists have documented wind setdown events in various locations around the world. In 1882, a similar phenomenon occurred at Lake Menzala in the Nile Delta, where strong winds pushed back water and temporarily exposed the lake bottom. In 2003, wind-driven water displacement occurred at the Nile Delta near Port Said, where sustained winds pushed water away from the shore, exposing areas that were normally submerged. Even more dramatically, in 1969, a hurricane pushed back water in the Gulf of Mexico, temporarily exposing the seafloor and allowing people to walk on areas normally under several feet of water. These aren't just theoretical models. This actually happens. The question isn't whether wind setdown can occur, it's whether it occurred at the specific time and place described in the Exodus narrative. And here's where we run into a problem that's plagued the Exodus story from the beginning. We don't have clear archaeological evidence that the Exodus happened at all. There's no Egyptian record of Israelite slavery, no archaeological evidence of a massive population living in Egypt and then suddenly leaving, no evidence of a large group wandering in the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. This doesn't necessarily mean the Exodus didn't happen. Ancient records are incomplete, and absence of evidence isn't always evidence of absence. But it does mean we can't point to a specific date and say, this is when it occurred, and here's the meteorological data from that day. However, if we accept that some kind of Exodus event happened, even a smaller scale migration that was later embellished into a national epic, then the wind setdown theory offers a scientifically plausible explanation for one of the Bible's most famous miracles. The wind setdown theory is not the only scientific theory in play. There are several other theories gaining traction. One theory involves a tsunami caused by the volcanic eruption of Santorini around 1600 BCE. Some researchers have argued that the eruption, one of the largest in human history, triggered massive tsunamis in the eastern Mediterranean. A tsunami doesn't just bring a wall of water crashing onto shore. First, it pulls water away from the coast, exposing the seafloor for a brief period before the wave hits. Could the Israelites have crossed during this temporary recession, only for the returning tsunami to destroy the pursuing Egyptians. It's dramatic, but there are serious problems with this theory. The timing is wrong. Santorini erupted centuries before the most commonly proposed dates for the Exodus. And tsunami recession typically lasts only minutes, not long enough for a large group to cross. Another theory suggests an underwater earthquake could have temporarily raised the seafloor in a shallow area, creating a brief land bridge before the ground settled back down. While seismic activity can alter water levels, there's no evidence of such an event occurring at the right time and place. A third theory proposes that the parting was actually a tidal phenomenon. Some shallow coastal areas experience extreme tides that can expose large stretches of land for several hours. Could the Israelites have crossed during low tide, with the Egyptians getting caught by the returning high tide? This theory has the advantage of being completely natural and predictable, but it has a major weakness. If the phenomenon was regular and predictable, why would the Egyptians, who knew the area well, be caught by surprise? The wind setdown theory remains the most compelling because it explains all the specific details mentioned in the biblical account. The east wind, the overnight duration, the timing that seemed miraculous but was actually a rare natural occurrence, and the sudden return of the water. But this raises a philosophical question that goes to the heart of how we understand miracles. If the parting of the Red Sea, or more accurately, the Sea of Reeds, can be explained by natural phenomena, does that make it less miraculous? For some people, the answer is clearly yes. If there's a scientific explanation, then it wasn't divine intervention. It was just good timing and favorable weather conditions. But there's another way to look at it. Consider the precision required for everything to align exactly as described. The Israelites would need to arrive at the water's edge at the exact moment when unprecedented winds began to blow. The winds would need to be strong enough and sustained enough to create a passable land bridge, but not so strong that people couldn't walk through them. The crossing would need to be completed within the narrow window when the land bridge existed, and the Egyptian army would need to enter the passage at the exact moment when the winds were dying down and the water was about to return. From this perspective, the miracle isn't the suspension of natural laws, it's the perfect orchestration of natural events at the exact moment needed. This interpretation actually makes the biblical account more interesting, not less. Instead of imagining God as a cosmic magician performing impossible tricks, we see something more subtle, a deity working through nature itself, using the very laws of physics that govern the universe to accomplish specific purposes at specific moments. The Bible itself supports this interpretation. Remember, the text specifically mentions the east wind. It doesn't describe the parting as purely supernatural. It describes a natural mechanism that was timed with perfect precision. Ancient peoples understood this better than we sometimes do. They didn't draw the sharp line between natural and supernatural that modern people often do. For them, God working through wind and water was just as miraculous as God defying the laws of nature. Whether the wind set-down explanation diminishes or enhances the miracle probably depends more on your theological perspective than on the science itself. What's undeniable is that the science makes the story plausible in a way it hasn't been for skeptics. The parting of the sea isn't just a fairy tale or a metaphor. It's an event that could actually have happened, witnessed by real people in a real place, through a rare but scientifically explainable phenomenon. So could the Red Sea parting really have happened? The science says yes, it's possible. Not through magic or the suspension of natural laws, but through a remarkable alignment of geography, meteorology, and timing. We may never know for certain whether the Exodus happened as described or whether a wind set-down event occurred at the exact time and place the Bible claims. But we do know that the phenomenon is real, documented, and scientifically explainable. Sometimes the most miraculous thing isn't that nature's laws are broken, but that they work exactly when and how they're needed most. So what do you think? Does a scientific explanation make the story more believable or less miraculous? Should we be looking for natural explanations for biblical events, Or does that miss the point entirely? And if the parting can be explained by wind, what other biblical miracles might have natural explanations we haven't discovered yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective, whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between. If you enjoyed this deep dive into biblical archaeology and science, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Should I Go? We've got plenty more ancient mysteries to investigate, and trust me, some of them are going to blow your mind even more than this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Check out some of our other great videos waiting for you to explore.